"Don't touch that little girl's dress," Alessandro Moretti said quietly. But the room was already silent because everyone had seen what happened. The crystal glass slipped from Isabella Romano's fingers, and a stream of red cranberry juice spread across the small blue dress of Sophia Bell, the 4-year-old daughter of the woman who worked in the Moretti estate kitchen. For a moment, nobody moved. The guests sitting around the long marble table watched the stain grow darker against the fabric. But no one stood up. No one asked if the child was okay. Isabella looked down at Sophia with a soft smile that seemed almost polite. "Oh my, I didn't see you there," she said. The words sounded like an apology, but her eyes told a different story. Sophia stood completely still. The little girl did not cry. She did not complain. She simply looked down at her dress, then looked toward her mother, Maria Bell, as if the first thing she worried about was not the stain, but whether her mother would lose her job. "I'm sorry, Mommy," Sophia whispered. Those 3 words were the reason Alessandro stopped moving. He had spent his entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from him. People who wanted his money, his influence, his name. But in that moment, the most powerful man in the room saw something he had never expected to see. A child apologizing for something someone else had done to her. Alessandro Moretti was known across the country as a man who noticed everything. His business empire was built on reading people before they revealed themselves. Yet somehow, he had failed to notice the quiet cruelty happening inside his own home. Isabella reached for a napkin. "Please, Maria, take her away and change her. We don't want this little accident ruining the evening." Her voice was calm, almost caring. That was what made it worse. She did not sound like someone who had done something wrong. She sounded like someone managing a small inconvenience. Maria lowered her eyes. "Of course, Ms. Romano." She gently placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Come on, sweetheart." But before Sophia walked away, something small fell from the sleeve of her old blue dress. A tiny piece of folded fabric landed near Alessandro's chair. The room was too busy watching Maria and Sophia leave to notice. Alessandro noticed. He always noticed. He reached down and picked it up. It was not a toy. It was not a piece of the dress. It was a small patch of cloth sewn carefully inside the sleeve, hidden where nobody would normally look. On it were faded letters almost impossible to read. Thomas Bell. Alessandro froze. That name belonged to a man who had disappeared from the Moretti family records years ago. A man everyone said had been just another employee. A man Alessandro barely remembered because his file had vanished long before anyone questioned why. "Where did she get this?" Alessandro asked. The question was quiet, but the temperature of the room changed instantly. Isabella looked at the fabric in his hand, and for the smallest moment, her perfect expression disappeared. It was less than a second, but Alessandro saw it. Fear. Then it was gone. "Probably something old from her father," Isabella replied smoothly. "You know how children keep meaningless things." Meaningless. The word stayed in Alessandro's mind, because he knew one thing about his family better than anyone. Nothing connected to the Moretti name was ever meaningless, especially something someone had tried to hide. Across the room, Sophia looked back before leaving with her mother. She saw Alessandro holding the small piece of cloth. She did not know why it mattered. She did not know what secrets adults had buried. She only knew one thing her father had taught her before he was gone. If someone finds this, it means they are finally paying attention. Alessandro looked at the doorway where the little girl had disappeared. Then he looked back at Isabella. For the first time that night, he was no longer watching his fiancée. He was watching a mystery that had walked into his house wearing a stained blue dress, and he needed to know why. The room became quieter after Sophia and Maria left, but Alessandro Moretti could still feel the weight of what had happened. The guests returned to their conversations, pretending the moment had passed, but Alessandro remained seated with the small piece of fabric in his hand. Thomas Bell. A name that should not have been forgotten. A name that should have existed somewhere in the records of the Moretti estate. Yet somehow it had disappeared. Alessandro turned the fabric over carefully, studying the faded stitching. He had seen thousands of documents in his lifetime. He had reviewed contracts, property records, and company reports worth millions of dollars. But this small piece of cloth caught his attention more than any expensive paper ever had. Because someone had hidden it. And someone had hidden the person connected to it. "Is something wrong?" Isabella asked from across the table. Her voice was calm again, perfectly controlled. Alessandro looked at her. "Do you know Thomas Bell?" The question was simple. The answer came too quickly. "No. He was just an employee, was he not?" Alessandro noticed the hesitation before the sentence. Tiny pause. A small correction. Something most people would miss. But Alessandro built his entire life around details. Isabella reached for her wine glass and smiled. "Why are you asking about a former employee because of a child's old piece of fabric?" she said. "It seems like you are searching for meaning where there is none." Maybe years ago, Alessandro would have accepted that answer. He had trusted Isabella because she appeared reasonable. She knew how to speak in the right rooms, smile at the right people, and say the right words. She donated to charities. She hosted events. She knew exactly how to look like someone who belonged beside him. But tonight, for the first time, Alessandro wondered if he had been looking at the image instead of the person. The next morning, he entered the private records room inside the Moretti estate. The room contained decades of family documents, old employee files, security reports, property information, everything connected to the history of the estate. A place where every name mattered. Except one. Thomas Bell's file was missing. Not damaged. Not misplaced. Missing. Alessandro stood in front of the shelves, his expression unreadable. "Find every backup copy," he told his assistant. "Every archive. Every old database. I want everything connected to Thomas Bell." While the search began, Maria Bell was called into the main office. She stood quietly near the door, holding Sophia's hand. The little girl still wore the same small bracelet her mother had made for her. Alessandro noticed Sophia looking at the room carefully, not touching anything, not moving unless asked. She had learned to make herself invisible around powerful people. That realization bothered him more than he expected. "Maria," Alessandro said, "why did you never tell me your husband worked for my family?" Maria looked down. "Because it was not my place to speak about things that belonged to the Moretti family." Alessandro studied her face. "And who told you that?" Maria did not answer immediately. Then she said softly, "Everyone." The answer stayed in the room. Everyone. Not one person. Not one moment. A system. A belief that some people were allowed to speak while others were expected to remain quiet. Sophia gently pulled her mother's hand. "Mommy, do not worry. Mr. Moretti is looking." Alessandro heard those words. He looked at Sophia. The child did not know about business. She did not know about power. She only knew that someone was finally paying attention. Then his assistant entered with a folder. "Mr. Moretti, we found something. There is an old backup record. But it was almost deleted." Alessandro opened the folder. Inside was a single photograph from years ago. Thomas Bell stood beside Alessandro's father outside the estate gates. And in the background was the same blue dress Sophia was wearing in the picture beside her mother. Alessandro stared at the image. The past had not disappeared. Someone had tried to erase it. And now, because of a little girl and a stained dress, it had returned. But the biggest question remained. Why would anyone go so far to remove Thomas Bell from the Moretti family's history? The photograph sat on Alessandro Moretti's desk for several minutes, untouched. He had faced difficult decisions before. He had watched companies collapse, partners walk away, and powerful people reveal their true intentions. But this was different. This was not about money or business. This was about a name that had been erased from his family's history. Thomas Bell was not just an employee. He had been standing beside Alessandro's father in the old photograph like someone trusted, someone important. Yet the official records said something completely different. According to the files, Thomas Bell was a temporary worker who left years ago without explanation. Alessandro knew that could not be true. People did not simply disappear from the Moretti estate. Their names remained in records, Their work was documented. Their history was preserved, unless someone wanted that history gone. Alessandro picked up the phone and called his head of security. "I want every camera archive from the East Wing reviewed," he said. "Not just the current files. Everything from the last 10 years. His security director hesitated. "Sir, some of those archives were transferred after the system upgrade." Alessandro looked back at the photograph. "Then find the ones that were transferred." Across the estate, Sophia sat at a small table in the kitchen with her mother. She was coloring quietly with a box of old crayons that one of the staff members had given her. Maria watched her daughter carefully. "You should not have spoken to Mr. Moretti," Maria whispered. Sophia looked up. "But he asked." Maria sighed. "Sometimes people with power ask questions because they already know the answers they want." Sophia looked at the bracelet on her wrist. "Daddy said people who tell the truth should not be scared." Maria froze for a moment. She looked at the bracelet, then quickly looked away. Alessandro noticed that moment from the doorway. He had not meant to interrupt them, but he had heard enough. Thomas Bell had left behind more than a missing file. He had left behind a daughter who still carried his words. "Maria," Alessandro said, stepping inside. "What exactly did your husband do for my family?" Maria stood immediately. "Mr. Moretti, I do not want trouble." "I did not ask if you wanted trouble," Alessandro replied calmly. "I asked what he did." Maria looked toward Sophia, then lowered her voice. "Your father trusted Thomas. He handled security information. He knew the estate better than anyone. But after he passed away, everything changed." Alessandro's expression hardened slightly. "What changed?" Maria looked at the floor. His name stopped appearing. People stopped mentioning him. It was like everyone decided he had never been here. Before Alessandro could answer, his assistant entered with another folder. "Sir, we found something unusual." Inside was a security report from 8 years earlier. The document was not missing, but several pages had been removed. The remaining page showed one sentence written by Thomas Bell himself. "If anything happens to me, check the old family archive before trusting anyone who arrives after." Alessandro read the sentence twice. The words felt heavier each time. Someone had not only erased Thomas Bell. Someone had warned that the person responsible might still be close to the family. Alessandro turned the page and found something else. A visitor access record from the same week Thomas disappeared. One name appeared repeatedly: Isabella Romano, his fiancée. For the first time, Alessandro felt something colder than suspicion. He felt uncertainty about the person standing closest to him. But he did not confront Isabella. Not yet. He knew people who hid secrets rarely revealed them when accused. They revealed them when they believed they were safe. That evening, Alessandro watched Isabella enter the estate with the same confident smile she always wore. She greeted guests, thanked employees, and acted like nothing in the world had changed. Then she noticed Alessandro holding the old photograph. Her smile paused for half a second. Tiny reaction, almost invisible, but Alessandro saw it. And this time he knew exactly what he was looking for. Because the question was no longer why Thomas Bell disappeared. The question was why Isabella Romano was afraid of a man who had been gone for years. The next morning, Alessandro Moretti did something unusual. He arrived at the estate before anyone expected him to. He did not enter through the main doors. He did not announce his presence. He simply walked through the quiet halls and watched. For years, people inside the Moretti estate had learned how to behave when Alessandro was nearby. Employees became more careful. Guests chose their words. Even family members measured their reactions. But Alessandro was no longer interested in what people said when they knew he was listening. He wanted to see what they did when they thought no one was paying attention. He found Isabella in the private office reviewing documents for the upcoming engagement announcement. She looked calm, organized, completely in control. "You were up early," she said with a smile. Alessandro placed the old photograph on the desk between them. "Do you remember Thomas Bell?" Isabella looked at the picture. This time, She did not answer immediately. It was only a moment, a small pause, but Alessandro noticed. "I told you yesterday," she said carefully. "He was just an employee." Alessandro leaned back. "Interesting, because my records show he had access to security systems, family archives, and private areas of this estate." Isabella closed the folder in front of her. "Maybe your old records are wrong." That answer was reasonable, almost too reasonable. Alessandro did not argue. Instead, he asked a different question. "Do you know why the camera footage from the dinner disappeared?" Isabella looked surprised. "What camera footage?" Another small mistake. Alessandro had never told her that he was investigating the missing footage. He watched her face carefully. For a brief second, her confidence weakened. Then she recovered. "I assume you are talking about the little accident with the girl," she said. "Alessandro, are we really going to spend time investigating a glass of juice?" He said nothing, because that was exactly what he wanted to hear. She had reduced everything to a glass of juice. But Alessandro knew the juice was never the story. The story was why someone powerful needed a 4-year-old child to disappear from a dinner table. Later that afternoon, Alessandro asked his assistant to perform a quiet review of the estate systems. Not an accusation, not an attack, a test. He created a false request inside the family security system. A request that only someone with unauthorized access would see. Then he waited. Within an hour, the alert appeared. Someone had opened the file. The access record showed one name, Isabella Romano. Alessandro stared at the screen. The result did not prove everything, but it changed the question. He was no longer asking if Isabella knew something. He was asking how much she knew. Meanwhile, Sophia sat in the garden with a coloring book beside her. Alessandro walked past and noticed the blue dress hanging neatly over a chair. Maria had washed it carefully. The stain was gone, but the small repaired section on the sleeve remained. Sophia noticed him looking. "My mommy fixed it many times," she said. Alessandro looked at the sleeve. "Why keep wearing something old?" Sophia touched the fabric gently. "Because Daddy fixed this part before." Alessandro looked at her. "Your father repaired your dress?" Sophia nodded. "He said little things matter because people usually ignore them." Those words stayed with Alessandro. Little things matter. That was exactly how someone had hidden Thomas Bell. Not with a dramatic action. Not with something obvious. Just small changes. Missing pages. Deleted records. Quiet decisions made by people who believed nobody would notice. That evening, Alessandro reviewed the security access logs again. He found something else. Isabella had not only accessed Thomas Bell's old records. She had searched for one specific file. A file that had been locked for 8 years. The title was simple. Family Archive, Bell Incident. Alessandro opened the file request history. The last person who tried to access it before Isabella was Thomas Bell himself. Then another notification appeared on the screen. A new access attempt was happening right now. Someone was trying to delete the remaining copy. Alessandro stood up immediately. For the first time, he was certain of one thing. The person hiding the truth was not afraid of what Thomas Bell had done. They were afraid of what Thomas Bell had left behind. The screen in Alessandro Moretti's office stayed frozen for several seconds. The words on the monitor were simple, but they carried a weight that changed everything. Family Archive, Bell Incident. Someone had tried to erase the file. Someone had tried to remove the last remaining piece of Thomas Bell from the Moretti family's history. Alessandro did not call anyone. He did not make an announcement. He simply saved a copy and closed the system before the deletion could finish. In his world, the loudest person was usually the least dangerous. The people who truly hid things were patient. They planned quietly. They believed time would protect them. But time had just failed them. The next morning, Alessandro met with his legal team in a private conference room. He placed the evidence on the table. The missing employee records. The altered security files. The access logs connected to Isabella. "Is this enough?" he asked. His attorney reviewed everything carefully. It is enough to ask questions. It is not enough to make a public accusation. Alessandro nodded. That was exactly what he expected. Suspicion was not justice. A powerful man accusing someone without proof would only create another unfair situation. He needed facts that could not be ignored. He needed a complete chain of evidence. Meanwhile, Isabella continued acting as if nothing had changed. She attended charity meetings. She spoke with guests. She smiled for photographs. To everyone outside the Moretti family, she looked like the perfect future wife of a powerful businessman. But Alessandro noticed something different. Every time someone mentioned Sofia, Isabella changed the subject. Every time someone mentioned Thomas Bell, she became careful with her words. That afternoon, Alessandro asked Maria to meet him privately. Sofia sat nearby with a coloring book, quietly drawing pictures of flowers and houses. "I need to ask you about your husband," Alessandro said. Maria looked nervous. "I already told you what I know." "No," Alessandro replied. "You told me what you were allowed to say." Maria looked at him. For the first time, she realized he understood. She took a deep breath. Thomas believed someone inside the family was changing records. He said important things were disappearing. Alessandro leaned forward. "What kind of things?" Maria looked at Sofia, then answered quietly. "Documents, names, agreements, things that showed who helped this family before it became powerful." Alessandro looked at the child sitting nearby. Sofia was not listening to the conversation. She was carefully coloring inside the lines. She was just a 4-year-old girl who had been placed in the middle of something much bigger than herself. "Did Thomas leave anything behind?" Alessandro asked. Maria hesitated. Then she touched Sofia's bracelet. "Only this." Alessandro looked closer. The bracelet was handmade from simple blue fabric. Nothing valuable. Nothing that would attract attention. That was exactly why it had survived. Maria explained that Thomas made it himself because Sofia loved the color blue. But before he gave it to her, he placed something inside the stitching. He said if the right person ever found it, they would know what to do. Alessandro carefully examined the bracelet. Hidden inside the fabric was a tiny sequence of numbers. Not a password. Not a date. A storage code. His assistant quickly checked the system. The code matched an old private archive account that had not been opened in years. Alessandro entered the code. A single audio file appeared. Thomas Bell's voice filled the room. "If you are hearing this, then I could not explain the truth myself." Maria covered her mouth. Sofia looked up because she recognized her father's voice. The recording continued. "The person who changes small things is usually the person hiding the biggest secret. Look at the records. Look at the people who benefited. Do not trust appearances." The audio ended. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Alessandro looked at the screen. The message did not name Isabella. It did not give him an easy answer. But it gave him something more important. Direction. Then another file appeared automatically. A financial document. A transfer made 8 years earlier. A company connected to Isabella Romano had received money from a private Moretti account. Alessandro stared at the number on the screen. The truth was getting closer. But so was the danger of moving too quickly. Because now he knew something important. Isabella was not hiding a mistake. She was hiding a plan. The financial document remained open on Alessandro Moretti's screen long after everyone else had left the conference room. The number was not the most shocking part. In his world, millions of dollars moved every day through companies, investments, and acquisitions. Money alone did not surprise him. What surprised him was the pattern. 8 years earlier, a private Moretti account had transferred funds to a company connected to Isabella Romano. The payment had been hidden inside a series of smaller transactions, each one designed to look ordinary, small enough that nobody would question them, small enough that they would disappear among thousands of other records. But Alessandro had spent his life learning one lesson. The things people tried hardest to make invisible were usually the things that mattered most. He printed the document and placed it beside the old photograph of Thomas Bell. Two people from different parts of his world. One a powerful family leader. The other a security employee who had been forgotten. Yet somehow, their stories were connected by a secret someone had spent years protecting. Alessandro needed more than suspicion. He needed to understand the entire plan. He asked his team to investigate the company connected to Isabella without revealing his involvement. Within hours, they discovered a series of unusual agreements. The documents were not illegal on their own. That was what made them dangerous. They were carefully written to appear normal. But together, they created a clear picture. Isabella had slowly positioned herself near decisions involving the Moretti family's future. She had influenced hiring choices. She had requested access to old records. She had built relationships with people who controlled information. She was not trying to enter the family. She was trying to control it. Meanwhile, Sofia sat in the estate garden beside Maria, drawing with her old crayons. Alessandro walked outside and saw the little girl carefully drawing a house with many windows. "What are you drawing?" he asked. Sofia looked up. "A house where everyone can see inside." Alessandro sat nearby. "Why is that important?" Sofia shrugged. "Because when people hide things, nobody knows who needs help." The answer was simple, but it stayed with him. For years, Alessandro had believed privacy and control were signs of strength. He had built walls around his family, his company, and his personal life. Now he wondered if those walls had also allowed people to hide things from him. Sofia looked at the blue bracelet on her wrist. "Daddy made this before we left our old house." Alessandro looked at it. "Why did he make it?" Sofia touched the fabric gently. "He said sometimes people forget small things, but small things can tell the truth." Alessandro looked away for a moment. He understood now why Isabella had reacted when she saw the bracelet. She was not afraid of the child. She was afraid of what the child carried. Later that evening, Alessandro returned to the archive room. He searched deeper into the old family records and found something unexpected. A hospital record from 8 years earlier. Thomas Bell had not simply disappeared from the estate records. He had reported concerns about missing financial documents before he left. The report included one handwritten note. "The person changing the records has access from inside the family circle." Alessandro read the sentence slowly. Inside the family circle. Not an outsider. Not a stranger. Someone welcomed into their home. Someone trusted. Then another file appeared. It was an old employee review. Thomas Bell had written a final recommendation before his departure. It was about Maria Bell. The note said, "Maria is honest. Protect her if anything happens." Alessandro closed his eyes for a moment. The woman who had been treated as invisible had been the person one of his father's most trusted employees wanted protected. The next morning, Alessandro watched Isabella enter the estate. She smiled at the staff. She greeted everyone warmly. She looked exactly like the person everyone believed she was. But Alessandro now knew something different. A perfect image could hide an imperfect truth. And he was no longer trying to prove that Isabella had secrets. He was trying to discover how far those secrets went. For the first time in many years, Alessandro Moretti stopped trying to protect his reputation and started protecting the truth. He understood something important. If he confronted Isabella Romano too soon, she would not admit anything. She would simply become the victim in the eyes of everyone around them. She would explain away every document, every missing record, and every suspicious detail. Powerful people rarely fall because someone accuses them. They fall because the truth becomes impossible to deny. So Alessandro made a decision. He would not expose Isabella yet. He would watch her. He would let her believe she was still in control. The next morning, Isabella arrived at the estate preparing for a charity event. She walked through the halls with the same confidence she always carried. She thanked employees. She greeted guests. She spoke about family values and responsibility. To anyone watching from the outside, she looked perfect. But Alessandro now saw the details behind the performance. He noticed how she asked which employees had access to old records. He noticed how quickly she changed conversations when Thomas Bell's name appeared. He noticed how she watched people who knew too much. Alessandro quietly hired an independent accounting firm to review old financial activity. He also requested a complete review of employee records from the last 10 years. Not because he wanted revenge, because he wanted a complete picture. Meanwhile, Maria Bell received a new contract from the Moretti estate. It was not a gift. It was a legal agreement that protected her position, her wages, and her rights as an employee. When Maria read the document, she looked confused. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Alessandro looked at Sophia, who was sitting nearby coloring another picture of the estate. "Because your family should never have needed permission to be treated fairly." Maria looked down, holding back emotion. She had spent years believing that survival meant staying quiet. Now someone with power was finally telling her that silence was not the same as respect. Later that day, Alessandro found Sophia sitting near the old garden wall. She was carefully fixing the sleeve of her blue dress with a small piece of thread. "You are repairing it again?" Alessandro asked. Sophia nodded. "My mommy says we take care of things that matter." Alessandro looked at the dress. "Even when they are old?" Sophia smiled slightly. "Especially when they are old. Old things can still be important." Those words followed him back into his office. Because that was exactly what happened to Thomas Bell. He was treated like someone who no longer mattered. His records were deleted. His name was forgotten. But the truth was still there, waiting. That evening, the independent review team sent Alessandro their first report. They found something new. A series of payments had been made from a private account connected to Isabella's legal advisors. The payments were not direct. They were carefully separated. But they all led back to the same purpose: gaining influence over Moretti family decisions before the marriage. Alessandro studied the report carefully. Then another piece of information arrived. A message from the estate security team. They had found the final archived camera file from the night of the dinner. The file had been hidden, not deleted. Alessandro opened it. The video showed the dining room before the incident. Sophia was walking carefully beside her mother. Isabella looked toward the child. Then she looked toward the security camera. For a moment, she knew exactly where it was. She knew she was being recorded. Then she moved the glass. Alessandro watched the screen silently. The truth was no longer just a suspicion. But there was something even more important. The video showed Isabella looking directly at the camera after the incident. Not surprised. Not confused. Calm. As if she wanted someone to notice. Alessandro leaned back slowly. He finally understood. The juice was never the message. The humiliation was never the goal. Isabella wanted to know one thing. She wanted to know if Alessandro Moretti would notice when someone powerless was treated like they did not matter. And now she had her answer. He had noticed. The night before the Moretti family meeting, Alessandro Moretti sat alone in his office watching the final security recording again. He did not watch it like a businessman. He did not watch it like a man protecting his name. He watched it like someone finally seeing what had been happening in front of him for years. The video showed Sophia walking beside her mother, a small child in an old blue dress, trying her best to stay out of the way. Then Isabella Romano looked around the room. She checked who was watching. She checked the cameras. She checked the people who would remain silent. And then she made her choice. Alessandro paused the recording. The most important part was not what Isabella did. It was what happened afterward. Nobody helped Sophia. Nobody asked if she was okay. Everyone waited for someone else to decide whether the child mattered. That was the part Alessandro could not ignore. The next morning he called a private family meeting. Not an engagement meeting. Not a business meeting. A meeting about truth. Isabella arrived wearing the same confidence she always carried. She believed she was walking into a conversation she could control. "Is this about the wedding plans?" she asked. Alessandro looked at her calmly. "No. This is about what happened in this house." Isabella smiled slightly. "If this is still about the child and the dress, I think we are making something small much bigger than it needs to be." Alessandro placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of the financial records, access logs, employee documents, and the security footage. "That is exactly what I want everyone to understand," he said. "You thought it was small." The room became quiet. Family members looked at the documents one by one. The first item showed the missing Thomas Bell records. The second showed Isabella's access to restricted files. The third showed the financial connections between her advisors and hidden accounts. Isabella did not panic. She did not raise her voice. She did what she always did. She tried to control the story. "You are misunderstanding everything," she said. "I was trying to protect this family." Alessandro looked at her. "Protect it from who?" Isabella hesitated. It was a simple question, but it exposed the problem. She could explain a mistake. She could explain a misunderstanding. But she could not explain why protecting the family required deleting someone's history. Then Alessandro placed the final piece of evidence on the table. The old recording from Thomas Bell. The room heard his voice after 8 years. "If you are hearing this, look at the people who benefited from my silence." Nobody spoke. The words were not an accusation. They were a warning that had waited years for someone willing to listen. Maria stood quietly near the door with Sophia beside her. Sophia did not understand the documents or the family history. She only understood that everyone was finally looking at her mother with respect instead of suspicion. Alessandro turned toward Sophia. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia nodded. "Why did you keep the bracelet safe for so long?" Sophia looked down at the small blue bracelet. "Because Daddy said some things are important even when nobody else sees them." The room went silent again. Alessandro looked at the family members around the table. Then he looked back at Isabella. "That child protected the truth better than all of us." Isabella's expression changed for the first time. Not anger, not sadness. Fear of losing control. She realized something important. The evidence was not just about money or records. It was about the one thing she could not manipulate. The truth everyone had ignored. The family council reviewed the evidence carefully. They did not remove Isabella because Alessandro demanded it. They did not make a decision based on emotion. They made it because the documents, records, and witnesses showed a pattern of deception. Isabella Romano lost her position in the family foundation. Her access to Moretti records was removed. The engagement was ended. But Alessandro was not finished. There was one final thing he needed to do. He needed to return to the place where Sophia had been made to feel invisible and show everyone that she had never been invisible at all. The same dining room where Sophia Bell had stood alone with a stained blue dress was now filled with the people who had once looked away. The long marble table was still covered with expensive plates, crystal glasses, and carefully arranged flowers. But something had changed. The room no longer belonged to the people with the most money or the loudest voices. It belonged to the truth that had finally been spoken. Alessandro Moretti stood at the head of the table, not as a man demanding obedience, but as a leader accepting responsibility. Maria stood beside Sophia, holding her daughter's hand. For years, Maria had entered this room quietly. She had served meals, cleaned after guests, and made herself smaller because she believed that was the only way to protect her child. But today, she was standing where everyone could see her. Alessandro looked around the room. "Before we leave this table, there is something that needs to be corrected." He placed a folder in front of the family council. Inside was a revised employment agreement for Maria Bell. It included fair compensation, full benefits, and official recognition of her role within the Moretti estate. But Alessandro did not stop there. He placed another document beside it. A restoration record. Thomas Bell's name was being returned to the family archives. His years of service would no longer be hidden or erased. A person's value does not disappear because someone chooses not to record it, Alessandro said. Maria looked at the documents silently. She had expected an apology. She had expected kindness. She never expected the truth to be placed into the official history of the family. Sophia looked at the table and then at Alessandro. "Can I sit here?" she asked softly. It was a simple question, but everyone in the room understood what it meant. For months, Sophia had learned that certain places were not for people like her. Certain rooms, certain chairs, certain conversations. Alessandro pulled out the chair beside him. "You should have been sitting here all along." Sophia climbed into the chair carefully. No one laughed. No one questioned it. The same people who once saw her as an interruption now watched as she became a reminder of something they had forgotten. Respect was not something given only to people with important names. It was something every person deserved. Later that week, the Moretti Family Foundation released a public statement about the internal investigation. It did not mention rumors or personal conflicts. It focused on facts, the evidence review, the altered records, the misuse of access. Isabella Romano was removed from all positions connected to the foundation and family operations. The legal process continued based on the documented evidence. She was not defeated by anger. She was held accountable by the truth she had underestimated. Alessandro never told Sophia that she had changed the Moretti family. He did not want her to carry that responsibility. She was still a child. She still needed to draw pictures, play games, and enjoy simple moments without knowing the weight of adult problems. One afternoon, Alessandro found her sitting in the garden, drawing another picture. This time, it was not a house with many windows. It was a table with many chairs. "What is this?" he asked. Sophia smiled. "A place where nobody has to stand alone." Alessandro looked at the drawing for a long moment. Years earlier, he had believed power meant controlling every outcome. Now he understood something different. Real power was noticing the people everyone else ignored. It was using influence to repair what had been damaged. It was choosing responsibility when silence would have been easier. The blue bracelet Sophia wore remained on her wrist. The old dress was carefully folded and kept in the Moretti family archive, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a reminder of the night everything changed. A small child had walked into a world built on status and reputation. She had not arrived with money. She had not arrived with authority. She arrived with honesty, kindness, and the courage to notice what others ignored. And in the end, the little girl who everyone expected to disappear became the reason an entire family remembered what honor truly meant.